And finally, I'm going to introduce Gail Gordon. Gail, like Aditya, after Bank Street, went to get her master's in social work, and in Gail's case also did postgraduate work in family therapy at the Ackerman Institute and other training. Early in her life, she was a Peace Corps volunteer in Nigeria and came back to teach high school, and soon after that joined to become one of the first conference group of the Bank Street Infancy program. She worked as a child development specialist at a number of agencies, settling down at Little Sisters of the Assumption over on the east side in East Harlem from 1982 through 1992, where she directed their early intervention, home visiting and toddler nursery through the late 90s. And she also directed the early intervention, home visiting and toddler nursery from the late 90s through 2007. She's also served as an adjunct instructor at Borough of Manhattan Community College and been a faculty member at the Jewish Board Institute for Infants, Toddlers, and Families. She's a very respected veteran in the field.
Thank you.
Please welcome Gail.
Definitely a pleasure to be here today. Bank Street has been like a home to me. I've been thinking long and hard about what will the babies look like that we will be serving 25 years from now. And we've heard from the other three people, and I'll share with you my own thoughts. I do believe that they will come with the same basic equipment that has existed throughout our time on Earth, although the brain does continue to grow and become more complex with all of the multitasking that we are called on to do throughout our lives. It is the environment into which these babies are going to be born that is of concern. Right now, we are in a true transitional period in our history where we can continue to become more and more a country split between those who have a great deal and those who only manage to survive, or a country that has a more equitable distribution of wealth and a commitment to the whole. If we continue down the road we are presently going, babies born into the haves will have every advantage available, while the others may be in families that suffer from the stress of just managing with daily life. Will the government assume responsibility for continuing programs that build on what we have learned during this past generation about brain development, the influence of trauma on the brain, and the significance of a parent's own history of attachment on their child? Will there be an increase in developmentally appropriate programs like Early Head Start for any child whose family wants them? Or will we as a nation decide that the investment in babies is too much like socialism and too expensive in our corporate world? With the advent of all of the recent technology, many of these babies will not have to deal with early separation from their parents if the parents choose to work from home. This will become more and more possible as more work can be done online. The dilemma will be in terms of how the parents and babies begin to socialize. In this time period, the need for human relationships will become even more important because even 25 years from now, growth will continue to take place through relationships. Since the trend has been for both parents to be employed, the need for excellent childcare will not go away. Babies born a generation from now are more likely to be born into all kinds of families that will include single parents of both sexes, same-sex couples, grandparent-headed families, adoptive families, foster families, teenage parent families, and traditional families. This trend will continue as we learn to define family in a different way. Babies born 25 years from now are likely to be born into a different culture than the standard Anglo-Saxon culture, with families both from Latin America or Asian countries in the majority. Bilingualism will be common as these babies communicate within the home and outside the home. As I think of my own training to work with parents and very young children, I realize how important the things I learned from Dorothy Gross and Nancy Balaban more than 35 years ago, and how important they've been in my career. I still have Nancy's guide to looking for patterns in behavior theories, characteristics of a good anecdote, outline for doing an age level study, guide for observing children interacting with other children. Despite the many changes that have taken place during this past generation and a half, the nuts and bolts of work in the field will endure. We will need to be flexible enough to recognize the changes that we see taking place, but our core principles should remain the same.